any of those items from consent? No. All right, anyone from the public would like to pull any of those items from consent? No? Okay. We'll accept the motion.
Move to approve A through F.
Second.
All right. Motion by Blackwelder and second by Bruce. Thank you. All right, so we don't have anyone online. We don't have Dr. Barber online, right?
I don't see her name showing.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great, passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 6. We have recognition and presentations. We have a recognition of 20 years of service to Heriberto Carrasco, who's a maintenance assistant 2 at the MRF.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we will have both employees come to the front. We have Mike, the supervisor, an employee that is 20 years of service, and Mike will take the opportunity to talk a little bit about our 20 years of service from Mr. Carrasco. And thank you for your service.
Morning, everyone. My name is Mike Alderman. I'm a MRF maintenance supervisor. And I'm here to introduce Heriberto Carrasco and recognize his 20 years of service. He's very good at what he does. We depend on him very heavily. And I would like you all to congratulate him on 20 years.
Right,
The white paper was the attempt to provide some information and background on the solid waste system, which is part 1 of the white paper presentation. It discusses primarily the solid waste industry in California and the common aspects of how that industry performs its work. And with that information, the reader can recognize that ReGen Monterey presents one piece of a larger system of solid waste management. As you know, each of your jurisdictions has a franchise contract, which is securing the waste collection services. And those materials are brought here to ReGen. And that process is generally described in section 2 of the white paper, which is a history essentially from 1965 forward, when this property began its operation with a landfill, and has since evolved from that singular start to be an integrated facility of waste diversion, material recycling, beneficial reuse of materials, retail sales of donated and usable goods. And so it's quite a unique facility in across the nation. Is the number of services provided here at one site is uncommon. Those are often performed in multiple sites. So it does represent a special asset for the county of Marin and quite frankly, the Tri-County area. So it's regionally sized and can perform a regional service to the municipalities in the region that, like your jurisdictions, have the same needs for waste disposal, recycling, organics diversion, you name it. Same needs, all created by us humans in the communities we live. And the white paper attempts to present to the reader how business has evolved here at ReGen, how it has always been a service to more than just the member agencies. And while that initial days of service to customers that weren't directly member agency related was small, that has grown since 1965 and represents a fairly a solid piece of support for the activities that occur here. And that support is in addition to the member agencies' participation in the business. So that's the overview. The intent here is you're welcome to have any question and answer conversations today. The desire from staff is that we benefit from your review at some point and be able to share comments to the chair and CC the general manager if you're making comments outside this meeting by email before March 8th. And we may have a little bit of time at the workshop to talk about this further, but we'll intend to bring it back as a draft in March if, we can try to take into account the feedback that's been provided. And the board will have another opportunity at that point to either continue to comment or decide that it's whether or not it's in shape for finalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Guy. Any comments from the board, questions? Bruce?
I haven't read the updated draft. I read the first draft. And I just hope that the final draft addresses fairly transparently why we take in waste from outside of our jurisdiction and how that relates to our landfill space. Because I want future board and public to have something to share amongst each other when these questions come up. Why are you taking garbage from elsewhere? And the first draft kind of danced around the subject a little bit, maybe because it's a touchy subject, and I haven't read the second draft.
Yeah, so there is this more information in this part 2, which was focused on ReGen, because part 1 was kind of hard to convey some of the information you were referring to. It was more a statewide and industry look. So take a look at part 2. It does not have a discussion around the capacity aspect. And so that would need to be an add for bringing that into the discussion. And as a brief response for all the directors, the mayor is referring to a decision that the board had made probably around 2007, and then comes across in the guiding principles that are attached to this white paper now, Director Delgado. So you'll see some background that does kind of give some guidance to staff and the board on bringing on new customers. And the board did convey that they had a desire to maintain a 75-year capacity of disposal for the member agencies. And that is not illuminated in the white paper at the present time. So that could be brought in, and that has been the guiding principle, and it's still is applicable in what is used.
Thank you.
Dr. Filippo.
That was one of my concerns as well. I think it's really important to our member agencies that we have that reassurance. Because I know people do ask, well, aren't we filling up the landfill with other people's trash? And that concern was mine as well. It also occurred to me that once we do get this into its final form, the more we can share this information, the better. There were things that I learned from this that I'd only heard about, like dumping all the trash into the shoreline at one time, and some of the things that we have really come along. The other thing that I think is important, especially in my constituency, when the prices go up, that this is a background to be able to share with our constituents about exactly what this place is doing. Because when you read that, at once upon a time, each jurisdiction had to have their own place to dispose of waste, and because we have this, joint powers, we don't all have to shoulder that. That's a really important thing to be able to share, because I think it's, very special what's done here, and people don't often appreciate how that burden is shared so greatly. And this paper is a wonderful start to that educational process, which I think once we start sharing it, each of us could probably take back to our cities some of the tidbits out of this report. We have a chance to make comments each city council meeting in Carmel, and I always try to share something about ReGen. And this is just full of those different tidbits and things that are important to share with our constituents who maybe don't know anything about how this all came about. So thank you very much. I think it's really a great work in progress.
Yeah, that was one of the intended use on the list of intended uses was for each of you to have at your fingertips and to share with those that you deem desire or have a need to hear for this information. I think there's staff has also seen that this would live in the director's binder for new director introductions. And it's likely would live on the website as well.
Do the new directors get a binder?
My understanding that there is a binder, and this is not presently in it because it's still in draft form, but it will join that information in the future.
I look forward to my binder.
Great.
Director Blackwell, did you have your hand up earlier?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also, I'm curious on, since we're getting rid of the organics, we're supposed to, what, 75% in the next couple of years or something like that? Is that gonna be reflected also in the white paper saying, we have reduced the intake? I don't know what that percentage would mean.
If it can be pulled into the white paper, that is, getting to a greater detail than how the presentation's laid out. The second, the first section is statewide. And then the second section, is a presentation of ReGen Monterey, what's happened here, over time. And that's still at a more general level, while, getting to, the discussion about the effect and changes around organics would take it to a much more granular detail. It's not to say not to do it, but I just want to give you a perception of the status of the drafts right now.
Right. Well, like, Director Delgado was talking about, when we're talking to the citizens out there and they ask questions and say, oh yeah, but we're also reducing the amount that's going in there because of the reduction of organics. And then they'll say, oh, how much is that? I go, I don't know. So instead of saying, I don't know, have some, it's probably only a small nominal, what, 3-4% that's being reduced from that landfill with organics.
So we certainly can reference it. The organic store, and we can do this quite easily, like you're referring to. But I would feel compelled to say for the directors and those here at this meeting that the organics diversion story at ReGen goes back to the 80s. So it really aligns with some active and, forward-thinking directors and staff that this evolution that's presented in part 2 has occurred. This is unique as well. It's unusual to see a reuse and recycling efforts that are performing to these levels. This is top 10% performance in the nation. And, it's from a small, local entity. It's a great story to tell. Composting began in 1988. Food and green waste, yard debris, vegetation. And it's only grown since then. And so the lift for SB 1383 for ReGen is really just around the food piece. And because much of our member agencies have residential customers, it's guidance to the residential customer of getting the food scraps into the green container with the vegetation. So it does represent a small percentage overall, and we'll reflect that in the report.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Petrifork. I think this is a great report. I think it'll be a large benefit, particularly for better understanding for this board as to the district's operations and benefits. So, and I'm happy to see that there's a firm deadline coming up. I think it's a snapshot of where we are. Other questions about issues about taking in out of district materials for disposal. I think that's later. That doesn't need to be addressed right away. This is a snapshot. But what this does is provide all of us with a baseline of information, so we're better informed to ask and investigate other issues that are before us, like the benefits of out of district materials coming in. And speaking of one of those, which is related in part to that question, I was looking on one of your figure 9 on page 57, and I tell you the truth, I don't completely understand it. Obviously, I didn't do the numbers, but it looks like the district collects, I'll call it excess revenue, not profit, but excess revenue from disposal, which helps to fund other parts of operations. Is that correct? I think I've heard that statement before.
Yes, there's, at ReGen, the business began with disposal only, having a landfill facility. And so it started with a disposal fee. And that disposal fee had to cover more costs than just the services in the landfill. And that still is true today.
Yeah, and that is the financial engine that drives the district. If you look at the budget, there's about 75% of the district's revenue comes from the disposal fee. So it's understandable, but I think that's one of the questions that this board should take on, is how do these disposal fees subsidize the other parts of the operation? Because now we have out of district customers, not only for disposal, but also for single stream recyclable, right? So we've got district and non-district customers bringing materials that are being handled by different parts of the district operations. So I think that's a question in my mind. I'd like to know more about finances. What's subsidizing? What customers are subsidizing what other customers? To put it bluntly, is I want to be assured that the member agencies are not subsidizing out of the district operations. So, but thank you. That's a later question, but I wouldn't have the understanding without this document. This is such a great lift. And on one other point, I think Mr. Melkor, you said that we would be, the board And management would be looking at these, what's called guiding principles. I cringe when I see that, I would rather have it called policy, but, I'd love to see that come back to the board with the management's recommendations as to what this overall policy should look like. It seems like there's a lot of, not sure that there's a couple of revisions. There's an original. And there's two revisions.
Yes.
And did each of those revisions supersede
Yes,
the other one? But you've included them
all three versions
so
are,
people can see the evolution.
yes.
Perfect, thank you.
So I just want to say thank you for your work. I appreciate that, you updated from the last time we saw it, and that was supremely helpful to me. I think similar to the other directors, I want to get into those next steps and figure out exactly what's coming in, what's going out, and figure out finances. But, so even your definition of solid waste was really helpful for me, because when we see 47% coming in of solid waste, I have to remind myself that's also maybe some of that is single stream recycling. Maybe that's not all going to the landfill. And I think ultimately we care about how long our landfill is going to last. And so, so breaking down those percentages, I realize can come later when we go into those details. So, so anyways, I just want to thank you for including some of that, because it helps me understand what it is we're looking at. So, and in terms of those guiding principles too, I'm anxious to review those, because again, this whole 75 years, I don't know, should we aim higher? Or is there something else, I'd like to have a thoughtful discussion about what year, how long do we feel like this should last, and what can we do to maintain that? So,
Sure. I would encourage each of you to briefly review the guiding principles, as there may be an opportunity at the workshop to start that conversation briefly.
I just had a
Great.
brief comment. 15 seconds, thank you. I hope that when we're done with this white paper, it includes a discussion that discloses to the public the trade-off between tipping fees, rates that they pay, member agency customers, and the revenue that we get from these external sources.
Sure. May I respond with a inquiry? Because when you talk about the revenues from a third-party source, not to have those changes the situation for the original parties. And so a full disclosure would be to also characterize that alternate scenario. Okay.
I think that's the crux of the origin of this white paper's intent. Now it's grown to be more historic, but that crux was justified to the public why we're filling up our landfill. And they don't know it means lower rates. If they knew, they had the choice, higher rates or external garbage. That's that triangle of landfill capacity, rate they pay now, and external revenue. How those 3 points interact, I thought was the crux of this intent.
Yeah, it's in the realm of the topic, so I see that would be brought into this, and we'll expand on that section.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, I'll take this out to public comments. Any public comments on this item?
Okay.
Guy.
Sure. Just let you know, Dr. Barber is on the call. I didn't recognize the number this with her.
Yes, hello, Dr. Berber. Okay.
Hello, everyone. They had some technical issues.
So I've been here for 30 years. When I got here 30 years ago, the expected landfill life was 50 years. 30 years later, it's 75 years. So these are moving targets. It's all based on what your assumptions are. And as we do more and more diversion from the landfill, it addresses that. The other thing I'd like to mention is this chart here in the second section where it talks about where the revenues are coming from. And the question about, well, are these being subsidized? When 30 years ago, it was 95% tipping fee. And in fact, the predecessor committee to the technical advisory group, that was one of the main things we were trying to do, is figuring out how to diversify income. Because back then it was 95 this, 5% landfill gas. That was it. That was all the revenue. And so that's the reason the MRF is there, because that's how we got that revenue right there for that. And as far as the outside county, I mean, it's pretty simple. You know, if we didn't have anything come from the outside, operations costs would go down negligibly, maybe 2-3%. Revenues would go down 40%, 50%. So that means we double our rates. And you put your finger right on it. It's all great to say that, oh, we're losing all this landfill capacity, but you know, if you give up that stuff coming in, you're doubling your rates to keep the same level of service here. And so it's pretty simple stuff. And so the question is though, is it coming from the right places? Should we be just talking about the county maybe? And then constantly, these guys update the life of the landfill every year. And it moves up and down as we go forward. And so this is a great discussion. You know, those guiding principles, those started in a strategic planning session from the board, and they should be looked at periodically. I mean, when we first started that committee with the TAC, that was 2007. Remember what happened in 2008? And you guys are a business, right? Well, what was coming across the scale took a nosedive. And so we had to figure out what to do, and that was diversifying, bringing everything in. But you need to look at it every year. And so this is a great starting point. And then I think that you can figure out a few simple messages. It's pretty simple. If somebody says, well, what about losing all the landfill capacity? Well, we still have 75 years. Do you want to double your rates? And we can stop doing it. It kind of ends the discussion. It's very similar to underground over at utilities. Everybody says we should underground all the utilities and say, well, to do that, PG&E would have to double your rates. You go, I'm good. I can live through the so you got to get both sides by the argument. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. All right, any other comments? No one online? All right, I'll bring it back for this first discussion.
Yeah, just want to say thank you to staff for all the work put into it. It's been a lot of effort. Thank you for all the feedback from all the directors. It supports the discussion that we have. So there's still work to be done. Don't forget, we're looking for your guys' comments by the 8th so that we can get incorporated, so that we can review them at the March board meeting. And at that time, we can invoke more discussion and any final changes that we want to see to this draft. And hopefully we can, capture the majority of those items. I think we're very close to where we want to be at on being transparent with the public to deliver the message of exactly what Mike and Bruce are stating on double the rate, reduce it, and then we have to consider the existing agreements that we have in place and when is the off-ramp, and I think we'll do a very good job of deciding what's best for our organization and the community that it serves. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, excellent. We'll move on to 7B, receive audit for fiscal year 2022-23.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we have Director of Finance, Helen, will be giving us an update on the audit letters and where we're at with closing the audit.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Directors. This morning, I'd like to present Ahmad Garbe, who is our new audit partner for Eve Bailey, and he's going to present to you the audited financial statements as well as any findings that he has to discuss with you today. So Ahmad, can you hear us?
Yes, I am online.
Thank you. I'm gonna leave the floor to you while you're ready.
All right, thank you, Helen. Good morning. My name is Ahmad Garaibe. I am the audit partner in charge of the audit for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023. This is the annual financial report. It's been concluded and completed. Scope of the audit is to ensure that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respect. It is a process that begins at the early part of the year. We split the audit into 2 or 3 phases. The first phase is the interim phase. This is when we look at your internal controls, the manner that you process receipts, disbursements, payroll, financial reporting. And then we wait for management to close the books, and we come in after the fact. And again, the audit is to ensure that the financial statements are fairly stated. It is effectively an affirmation of the financial information that was presented to you by management. So as soon as management closes the books, we confirm the amounts that are reported on the financial statements, and we are required to issue an opinion on whether these financial statements are fairly stated or not. And I'm pleased to let you know that we concluded that these financial statements are fairly stated. They met the reporting requirements, and along with that, a couple of items to communicate here. We are independent auditors of the district. It is a required communication to let you know that we are independent. And then conclusion of the audit, if we noted any, as I mentioned, we take a look at the internal controls. We did note material weaknesses in the financial reporting aspect of the amounts that were reported, specifically related to the bond refunding that had occurred in 2022 fiscal year, alongside with the calculation or with the estimates that were reported in the financial statements related to the closure and post-closure liabilities. So we worked with the district on getting these amounts restated, and so you will see there that the 22, your financial statements are comparative. It presents 2022 fiscal year and 2023 fiscal year. Both years were restated to reflect the correction in the financial statements. The financial statements indeed do include some estimates. Actual results may vary, and so those estimates are mainly the closure and post-closure liabilities, and along with that is the pension liabilities. And with that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Does the board have any questions? Director Delgado?
I have a quick question. Once anybody, I'm not sure who raised their hand, but after they finish, if you don't mind.
Sure. Oh, well, why don't you go ahead, Director Barber?
So I just had, first, thank you for the report and the work that you're doing the audit. Just had a quick question dealing with the bonding and the refunding, one of the sightings that you just spoke about. Can you give a little bit more detail on that part as far as what was reported and what the issue was?
Yeah, and so there was cash, restricted cash that was related to the old bond that was reported on the 2022 financial statements, and that cash was used as that cash was used to refund those old bonds. So that cash was restricted for payment of the old bonds. It remained on the financial statements of the 2022 financial statements, and upon confirming it and all of that, we noted that cash was actually used for refunding the old bonds. So effectively, the cash was replaced with a lesser amount of debt in the 2023 financial statements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director Delgado.
Yeah, in my discussion with the general manager yesterday, we looked at one of the documents related to this issue. I can't find it right now, where it discusses landfill closure, post-closure costs that are up to 31 million, and we have like 1.5 million set aside so far, so we're gonna start putting money away. But I think that's a kind of like the white paper issue. That's kind of a long-term broad issue, and I wonder if the general manager could explain to the board, maybe, or defer it to our workshop, but this gap between what we have for post-closure and how much we think it's gonna cost for post-closure and how we're going to afford post-closure expenses.
Yes, I can respond at this time. I think the way we're gonna look at this and approach it, Director Delgado, is that this is the minimum that we have to do under the law to have the post-closure funding there. I think it's a shortfall. We have discussed that we have a need to have a closure and post-closure fund. And the reason being, the calculation that's being used is for the full life of the landfill. And we should, in turn, we should be collecting more as we use, instead of trying to predict the life of the landfill and the fund that we would need at the end of the life. So I think we need to prepare ourselves in the future. So it will be, I think, more discussion around this as we bring this in our budget item, the closure and the post-closure fund, because it's taking the full life of the landfill, 150 years, into consideration. But if we were to close in 25 years, we would not be near the funds that we need to have for that type of closure. So I think reevaluating where we're at, I think this is the minimum criteria that we need to fulfill. But there is a greater criteria that we need to fill, and that's collecting the money as the usage of the landfill is happening, and not trying to project what we don't need at the end. We need to gather it up as we approach the end, is the difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Anyone else? Murphy?
Thank you very much for the audit work. I know that takes district staff as well as the auditor and restating the closure amounts, getting it right. It's great. I am also concerned about closure, post-closure, and I concur with the comments that, you know, this is where we should be looking at that, and I look forward to seeing a recommendation as to how we increase the state minimum. $1.5 million still amazes me. It's such a small amount. And along those lines, there's one other future liability. It's unfunded pension liability. It's let's see. In the audit on the packet page 118, they call it plan net pension liability. So it's future pension debt, and over the span of the last 8 years, that pension liability has been increasing at $1.48 million a year. $1.5 million a year. And so my question is that not for today, but, you know, are we gonna just keep adding in debt $1.5 million every year? Or is it gonna go down? What's the future right now? Because it's not an insignificant amount. Well,
It is not, I think
17 million right now.
it sits at the same place as the landfill question right before, is we really gotta act now on putting a reserve together for that liability so that we can pay off what is ours. So you have places that pay their liability off every year. I think we have Pebble Beach Community Services districts that do that every year. So that is one of the strategic opportunities for us when we created the last two reserves. Capital reserve and capital assets reserve. We will do the same with these two and introduce and make a recommendation to the board. But these are definitely items that have been deferred, and we would like to address very quickly here.
And I'm sure district staff would be totally on board, since it's district money that will be owed you.
Yes, yes,
So,
yeah, great point. And thank you, thank you. This is an opportunity for us to curb the liability sooner than just continue to push it down the line and
yeah,
pass it on to future generations. Thank you.
thank you.
Any other additional comments? All right, I'll take this out to the public for comments on the audit. Anyone in the chamber or online, raise your hands. No? Okay, I'll bring it back. Thank you, staff, for, again, working on this. I like the idea that, you know, what has come back has provided us with some things to think about and to move forward, to make some changes. So, I'm happy about that. So, all right, well, if there aren't any other further comments, I suppose we need a motion for this. I'll I'll take anyone.
Steve recommended motion to approve the audit, or accept the audit, what is the recommendation?
To receive the audit.
So we're doing the motion.
Do we need
Second.
a motion?
To receive? No.
Is Bob's online? Bob?
Yes.
Can he let us know if we need a motion or not?
Hello,
Hi, Bob.
hello, good morning, Chair and Board.
morning.
Yes, I am online. I believe Rob is listening to the meeting too. I think he may be having some audio problem, but you should receive the audit by motion. That would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So move.
Second.
Okay, so we have the motion by Director McKee and seconded by Director Peak. All right, all those in favor? Oh, wait, no, sorry, we need a roll call vote.
Correct.
Why do you need a roll call vote?
Because Director Barber is online. And so when someone's online, we need a roll call vote.
That is correct.
Director Askew? No. Director Barber?
Yes.
Director Blackwelder?
Yeah.
Director Ferlito?
Yes.
Director Garcia Ariola?
Aye.
Director McKee?
Yes.
Director Peak?
Aye.
Vice Chair Delgado?
Aye.
Chair Shirley?
Yes,
Motion passes.
all right, great, thank you. All right, moving on to staff reports. 8A, we have review finance, operating and recycling reports.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we'll have our finance manager, Garth Gregson, give out our monthly report.
Good morning, directors. We are 7 months through fiscal 2024, and the one-line summary is everything is looking pretty good. In terms of where we are year-to-date, revenue expense-wise, our tip fee revenue is about $23 million, and we are about 1.5% below plan, and $2.5 million better than we were in the same period last year. Our other revenue, which includes power sales, MRF revenue, and other miscellaneous things like sand and HHW fees, is about 7.6 million and is about 800,000 above plan. And that's primarily attributable to the MRF. The MRF is doing very, very well this year. We're about $1.5 million over plan, and we are about $400,000 better than we were last year. And it's reflective of the commodity prices. As we know, the commodity prices for the MRF products fluctuate up and down. And this year they are doing quite well. Operating expense wise, we are about 26.1 million. We're about $1.5 million over plan. And that's primarily in 3 areas: our environmental services cost, which has to do with the servicing of our landfill gas facility here, and our recycling services, which has to do with the transfer of the wood and green products that we send over to Keith Day, and he processes those. And there was also a brief period this year when we were transferring material to a MRF over the hill because our MRF was out of service because we had an equipment problem. So we spent a few $100,000 having to have them process our material. Bottom line for the year, we are about 4.7 million net income. We're about $500,000 under plan, which is about 10%. And we are about 1.5 million lower than we were for the same period last year, net income wise. As far as tonnage received, so far this year, we're about 595,000 tons, and we are about 32,000 tons higher than the same period last year. And our diversion percentage, year to date, the rolling 12-month year to date percentage for diversion is about 62%. Compared to 62.5% for the same period last year, so it has not really changed very much. It stays pretty constant. That's kind of where we are through January. Any questions? I'd be happy to take them.
Garth? Questions? Okay, Director Delgado.
There was a National Public Radio article about plastics not really being recyclable because it costs more to recycle old plastic than new plastic, and the oil industry is behind whitewashing us all, so we continue to need oil for plastics. The number 2, number 1, and number 5 plastics that we accept let's say containers, bottles, whatever, that are plastic 2, 4, 2, 1, 2, and 5. Is there a market for them and do they really get processed into new products or is it something else going on?
There is a market for those materials and we do process them through the MRF and we do sell them through our broker. And I think a lot of those end up domestically with other processors, to take that plastic and turn it into other materials. So yes, the answer is there is a market.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? All right, thank you, Garth,
You're welcome.
appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to 8B, report on technical advisory committee and SB 1383.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we have Eric Palmer, our communications expert technician, and he'll be presenting in lieu of Zoe Schultz. Thank you.
Good morning, Board. Eric Palmer, Public Education and Outreach Coordinator for ReGen. And I'm here to give you an update on the January meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee. And as a reminder to our new board members and the public, the TAC is a staff working group made up of at least one representative of each of your jurisdictions, along with our 3 franchise haulers and ReGen staff. It's a very collaborative working group. It makes sure that we're all aligned on our messaging to our residents and our businesses, and the group provides updates and discusses regulations and goals. Staff members do not make decisions in these meetings, but rather provide recommendations when necessary to this board or to their elected bodies. The committee met on Wednesday, January 10th, and SB 1383, of course, was a major topic of discussion as usual, and made up the majority of the meeting agenda. And SB 1383 is compliance is a perfect example of why a technical advisory committee is necessary and effective due to the complexity of the law and the need for various stakeholders to work together to make sure that we understand what we need to do collectively. So to begin, enforcement of SB 1383 began January 1st, 2024. Cal Recycle will notify jurisdictions prior to a compliance evaluation. But the TAC was informed that none of our member jurisdictions are subject for review at this time. Jurisdictions are also required to implement an inspection and enforcement program to ensure organic waste generators comply with the requirements of the law. And the TAC was informed that Cal Recycle has the TAC has informed that Cal Recycle has provided downloadable spreadsheets that can help jurisdictions track SB 1383 compliance. And as part of SB 1383, there are procurement requirements that on the part of the jurisdictions for the compost produced from organic material diversion. And ReGen member jurisdictions were notified of successful fulfillment of procurement in 2023. And we're expected to fulfill our procurement requirements for 2024 by the end of April, using Cal Recycle local assistance grants. Blue Strike Environmental, they also gave a presentation about the upcoming cycle of the local assistance grants, and they gave an overview of the local activities that can be funded by the grant. And those things will include a continuation of those procurement support, education and technical assistance, market research and marketing for target sectors, enforcement readiness toolkits, and training for your jurisdiction staff, and equipment and capacity building for edible food recovery. And as an example of that last program, you're able to see its benefits at the last meeting when we presented grants to nonprofits that are recovering edible food for hungry residents in need. And as a reminder, recovering edible food from commercial sources is another major objective of SB 1383. Also in the meeting, ReGen presented a draft budget of SB 1383 activities to take place next fiscal year. And they'll ultimately be included in an MOU between ReGen and member jurisdictions regarding assistance with the compliance. And then lastly, ReGen staff explained how a new law, SB 1013, was passed, and that expands which beverage containers can be accepted for CRV redemption and recycling. And as a recycling processor for the region, we have questions about the impacts of this legislation, because materials can be defined as recyclable, but we all know that that the market drives what is recyclable locally. And we've communicated to Cal Recycle that we need more clarification on how we're supposed to comply with these changes. Yeah, so that's a report for the January tenth meeting. We have Ted Terrassis from the city of Monterey on the line. He's the chair of the TAC committee. He'll be a little more informed than I would be if we have any follow-up questions, since he's a little more involved, but we can do our best to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Questions from the board? For Keith?
Thank you for the report. Is Blue Stripe part of Blue Zones?
No, they're separate.
Just the color and.
Same color?
Yeah, Blue Zones, I believe it's kind of like a green business, certification.
Is that blue-green? Oh.
Any other questions? Eric, Director Delgado.
Thank you. I had 3 questions. When you mentioned that none of our members will be reviewed at this time, we were notified by the state. Is that just because we're waiting in line, or is that because we're doing well and they don't need to?
Well, I guess the CalRecycle, they post a list of jurisdictions that are subject to these compliance evaluations. I don't have any further details about, beyond what was reported there.
Yeah.
I would say yes to your question. Yes, we are doing great. We are complying. We're meeting all the standards up to date. We're keeping track of them. That was the whole intent of the TAC committee to be formed, was to see alignment along not only our members, but everybody in the county, to show alignment, and that's been demonstrated with CalRecycle. We get CalRecycle joining our phone calls regularly, mainly to pick up what we're doing so they can cascade to other jurisdictions. So yes, we are at the forefront of compliance.
Is that partly why none of our agencies are going to be reviewed at this time?
Yes.
Second question, we're in compliance with procurement, is what I heard, I think. And my question is, does procurement equal diversion of organics? I don't know what procurement is in this case.
So, it's part of the law. The member jurisdictions have to, procure compost, and we're in a pretty unique situation, here where we have an agreement with, Keith Day Company. A lot of other regions are wondering what to do with their compost, and we came up with this innovative agreement where, local farms procure, the compost on, the jurisdiction's behalf. And, there's a small administrative fee that is paid, and that's covered by, CalRecycle. Yes.
Okay, so the procurement is actually being done by the farmers of Keith Day's compost, which we give him. And so because of the farmers, our procurement is in compliance. If they weren't buying and we weren't selling, we would be out of compliance.
Or, yes, and.
Or you would have compost
Yes,
in your more compost in your city.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Okay, last question. You mentioned that ReGen funding is going to support 1383 implementation. And my question is, what other sources of revenue are going into this effort, or is it just ReGen alone paying for it?
Ted, do you have an answer to that?
Well, it's mostly, the key was us as, and by the way, good morning to, the board chair, Shirley, and to all the members. Thank you for having me here. But just to kind of jump into the question, the main point, of us working together in the TAC and forming the MOU was to pool our resources to be able to address the variety of compliance issues that we would have for either outreach, education, procurement, as we just talked about, those sorts of things. And fortunately, I believe it was last year, I think the first year, I think it was the last year, where we get the actual local assistance grant funding from the state to help address these costs. Because if it weren't for that additional funding for the state, we would have to pay, you make up the difference for everything we've done. For example, we've come up with an app for edible food recovery called Carrot that we've talked about at these meetings before, and some other initiatives like that we were able to parlay that grant funding into our SB 1383 compliance. So the main funding sources are really the member agencies coming together for our MOU compliance, and then also using that funding from the state, fortunately, that's been coming to us and was actually increased for this coming year so that we can continue to not only comply with 1383, but hope make it a little bit less impactful to all of our respective budgets as member agencies.
Okay, so just a quick follow-up. It sounds like cities aren't contributing, but ReGen budget is contributing and state source funding is contributing.
No, just to clarify, the ReGen or MOU budget is funding from all the cities, all the member agencies contributing to the MOU. So we all are contributing together. The reason we brought the funding together was to kind of make it more efficient and easier. For example, we have like the recycling database, or if we hire HF&H, or if we hire Blue Strike, it's easier to do it once. So it may be reflected, like ReGen may have the contract or may do it on our behalf, but we're all contributing, all the cities and the county are contributing to those efforts so that we pool our funding basically and have it paid for through one entity. Even if it's ReGen, for example, they, holding the contract or executing the actual activity, still we are all contributing to offsetting our compliance costs. And that's the budget Eric just alluded to was the budget breakdown for the upcoming year, and then how much each member agency will have to contribute to get us to our target activities.
Okay, and last follow-up, the
Yes.
money that the cities are giving, like Pacific Grove, whoever, those come from their general fund, or do those come from giving ReGen the recyclables, which generate income, which is considered city contribution?
That's changed over time. Mostly now it's mostly all general funding that's coming in. In the past, actually, ReGen has actually used some recycling revenue to offset our MOU funding, our MOU costs, and we're actually trying to kind of get away from that since our process is becoming a little more mature now, and we're trying to kind of keep things a little bit more directly related. So example, the general funding costs going to the MOU to offset our compliance costs. So really it's that and the grant funding, as I mentioned before, to make sure that those are the direct costs that are offsetting our grant funding. So really, in our case, for example, in the city of Monterey, what we did was made a bit of a change to our franchise agreement to get more franchise fees coming to the city, and had a rate adjustment for collections in the city to basically counter the amount that we're going to have to pay that was going to increase to comply with SB 1383. So basically, yes, general fund income coming into the MOU in general, yes.
Thank you.
And we're working to get the MOU budget finalized and passed by your jurisdiction councils by July 1st. So you'll see what those costs are soon.
Thank you, Eric. Guy?
Yeah, if I could add just a couple pieces. It's important for the directors and your key staff that is dealing with SB 1383 to recognize the context of responsibility. And that responsibility of SB 1383 is to the jurisdictions themselves. And those requirements do involve activities of the jurisdiction only in procurement of supplies and materials to the jurisdiction. So there's SB 1383 procurement responsibilities that each of the jurisdictions has around their purchase of materials. That is separate than the compost option that has been provided to each of the jurisdictions, because SB 1383 has a compost purchase requirement that the jurisdictions are each supposed to make. That would require your public works group to define where to use their required amount of compost, because each of your jurisdiction is specified a volume that has to be used based on the size of your jurisdiction. And your public works would have to put a plan together of how to use that compost, where to use it, and then either contract for services to install the compost, purchase it, receive it, install it. As an option to that, ReGen, together with our third-party compost operator, have developed a program that allows the cities to pay a reduced amount to incentivize a lower price to other customers in the ag industry here to incentivize them to buy this jurisdiction's allotment of compost. And that's how that particular criteria was accomplished this past year, is through that program that relieves each of the jurisdictions the need to buy the compost, for their own use and put it to use in the jurisdictions. Bottom line, there are other procurement requirements that you or your administrative staffs may want to look at regarding jurisdictional compliance for SB 1383. The compost one, you have this alternate program available here, and I would predict that will remain pretty successful program. And then back to Director Delgado's earlier question about whether Cal Recycle reviewed or didn't review. My understanding is that each jurisdiction was reviewed, that Monterey County had good performance. And I believe there's a website we can share a link to that presents that information. Other jurisdictions and other counties were not so adept at getting ready for SB 1383, and so there are issues that are being had in other areas. And based on the performance review that Cal Recycle did, I don't project there will be a problem during the next review either for this jurisdiction.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think we owe the TAC a lot. We should be very grateful. I was on a few Cal Cities kind of webinars early on with these environmental groups, and cities were panicking about not having the ability to, what are they going to do with all this compost? How are they going to implement it? And I was on there thinking, oh, we've got it pretty good. And so I really want to thank the TAC for all the work, and our cities participate in that as well. But we owe it to them to walking us through this stepwise and getting us to this place where we are in compliance and moving towards, moving forward with a legislation that's, seemingly it's difficult. It's a big ask. And I think other jurisdictions are having a much harder time, but I think with that collaborative work, it has paid off immensely. So thank you.
I'd just like to add, Keith Day is our composter, and we have a lot of appreciation for him too, because he's delivered the service to the members and everybody involved in the composting. He's done a phenomenal job for us, and it would be a shortfall. We don't thank him for his efforts as well.
Yeah,
working with everybody.
Very good point. All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Eric. Okay, moving on to other correspondence. I'm going to address 9A and 9B and 9C together. These were all letters that we received looking for nominations for LAPCO, SDRMA, and CSDA. I think we'll wait for these nominations to come through. So at some point in the future, we will get these nominations back to us. We'll be able to vote on each one of these in the future. So we'll have staff review that, and then we'll come to a vote for those. And then 9D were thank you letters from Gateway Center and Meals on Wheels. The Meals on Wheels letter was not included in the packet, but I think Ida will make sure that we see that letter. So, all right, moving on to General Manager Communications.
I have a few general manager comments today. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce David Ramirez. He will be the successor to Guy Pretchenborg. So we have given David the opportunity to become the new Director of Engineering and Compliance for our facility moving forward after Guy goes on his retirement. So David, if you wouldn't mind just waving at everybody. And some of the reasons behind David, you know, he's been a very valuable component of our organization. He contributes all the time. He's always even keel. And he does a very good job of understanding what we've done already up to this point. He has 9 years of experience here, and I think that was a key contributing factor why his selection was successful. So thank you, David, for all the effort that you do and the service you provide to our organization. I also got an opportunity to meet with Supervisor Angela Curo San Benito. I was able to provide a tour and have short discussions around the site operations and what we offer to service to many members in the region. That was a great meeting with Supervisor Curo. I also was able to conduct my town hall discussions and at the kickoffs of most of the start times for all the different operations, and that's where we convey messaging of our organization, what we're doing, what we're planning, how it impacts our employees, and what we need from them for us to be successful at that time. During that town hall, we had a pre-planned heavy equipment exercise, which demonstrates our expertise in different knowledges and fields. And it's been something that we've been bringing to the town hall lunch is how do we demonstrate the skill sets that we have here? Through emergency, we had a second opportunity to see our folks jump in, and that was our fire brigade. We at our town hall lunch, we had a hauling vehicle coming in. He was on fire. He had fire within his hopper, and we see the vehicle moving in. And at our lunch, you see all our fire brigade team kind of jump up and start taking action, pull out the machines, pull out the sand, pull out the water. And 5 minutes later, they're putting out the fire. And that was a demo that we all got to see in real life, real time. And then we also had an ability to watch our heavy equipment operators. They dispersed 30 yards of material with 2 ejector trucks, used some loaders, and 5 minutes after that, we're able to clean up 30 yards of debris and put it back up on top of the truck. And that was an exercise demonstrating the skill sets of what our heavy equipment operators are doing on the top of the landfill. And again, it gives us appreciation for one another. What is the skill set? What is the delivery of these different teams here that have sometimes are not recognized by others? So it is a great opportunity, very successful Q1 town hall meeting that we had. We also had leadership training, and this was held on Crucial Conversations. It was one of several meetings that we're gonna have around Crucial Conversations, and it's setting the table for all the leaders and supervisors to be engaged in the difficult discussions. We can't tiptoe around them. We got to address them. We can't be offended, and we just have to know how to enter and exit those discussions and still have a very good relationship with our peers. It's the challenge that we face sometimes on this board is we want to deliver our messages, and then we have to do something with it at the same time without offending or crossing each other, you know, at any point in the discussion. So we're learning how to deal with that on a much better scale. I was also able to attend the Swana Gold Rush chapter. It was held in San Rafael. We got a tour of their material recycling facility that they have there. They're a very large transfer station, and they have quite some unique innovations going on there as well. So it was a great opportunity for me to meet with others in the industry. And we had our quarterly meeting at the same time that day. So it was a tour and a meeting for the Gold Rush chapter. I had an opportunity to have a follow-up meeting with Google X. I did sign a non-disclosure agreement on that item, but we did briefly talk about what we do here at our facility as well. So that was another opportunity for us to see what the industry is doing. A little bit about the X team from Google is they are a moonshot team that looks to resolve items that are further down the line, and they are more difficult to accomplish, but that's all that team focuses on. So they had interest on what we do, how we do it, and how do we get more granular in what we do for the industry across the nation, not only for one facility. So a really good meeting with them as well. A reminder, board workshop is scheduled for March 6th from 9 to 12 in lieu of our finance and personnel committee. And finally, I have UC Berkeley. We had ReGen hosting some researchers from UC Berkeley as they work on a prototype for new methods of measuring landfill gas emissions. And the team is on site testing wireless remote methane flux sensors or UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and terrestrial robotics to do some of that testing on the methane emissions with the goal of monitoring landfill emissions on a continuous basis. We've seen a robot dog out here that's able to walk on some terrain. And then we have these sensors that are being put in, and it's really to give us a real-time monitoring ability versus, looking at a plume where you may not know or are able to identify exactly where that source may be. Mr. Guy?
And if I would just add that it's the collaboration between ReGen and UC Berkeley is around an EPA grant that they have received. So we're a host and supporter in that proposal to EPA. And that the goals of the grant are to improve the understanding of fugitive emissions from a landfill, how to measure them, and then how to address and mitigate those. So best improvements and best management practices is really the goal of the grant. And that's the goal of why ReGen's participating, is to have an evolution in how ReGen performs in mitigating fugitive gas emissions, because more gas collected means more electricity produced, which means more revenues, less emissions. It's a win-win-win, but by going to a higher standard.
Thank you, sir. And that will conclude my comments.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to board communications. Oh, you have a question? Sorry, go ahead.
Two quick questions. The San Diego County Supervisor tour, what was the motivation? Was there any relation to current or future partnerships with us and San Diego County?
I think they wanted to investigate their opportunities. They have come to landfills space restraints in their county, which is they have 15 years left of life on that, so they're excluding external tons at this moment. They are looking at an opportunity whether they want to build an extended portion of their existing landfill, looking at opportunities to build transfer station. And I think they're just investigating at this point, but potentially they could be a customer, they can be a competitor, based on what pathway they want to pursue. But I think at this point, they're really just investigating what are the options and what are the costs associated to them before they take anything back to their own board. For us, it was just sharing what we do, and we made some recommendations on where else they can visit on low scale transfer station, high scale transfer station, smaller landfills, bigger landfills, to get a bigger gauge of what their opportunity may hold for them in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The only other question is, was Eric Palmer there to document the emergency response?
He was.
So I got some good video, including security video to watch us on Facebook and Instagram, which show the video of our team at work.
We also got video of, if I can interject, we also got video of Eric at work. So on the security cameras, you can see him.
I'm
running
very
around.
excited.
It was pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, very excited.
Great.
I just want to thank you for the report. I was wondering, the SWANA meetings, do they ever talk about landfills problems? I've seen in the news over the last few months, there's large LA landfill, it's near Castaic, and they're having problems with gas emissions and odor. And did they ever talk about what can go wrong and lessons learned?
They do, and I would probably want to defer this over to Guy a little bit more. It was my first SWANA meeting. I have been appointed to being the director on the Gold Rush chapter board, so my participation will allow me to invoke a lot more questions or maybe topics of discussion. but I'll defer to Guy because he's been there before me, and the seat he's relinquishing is the one I was gonna fill, so we can continue the history with ReGen participating in the local chapter.
And so Felipe is on the board of directors of the Swana Gold Rush chapter that did, as a public member, public agency member, referred to as a public director. There's also private directors from private practice that are also on the Swana board of directors. And it, like your board meetings, there's an agenda to their board meetings. They have different committees that report out, and they have officers and conduct their chapter business. So that often is the primary content of meetings. But to answer your question, yes, these topics do get talked about informally during the lunch time period, for sure. And then more formally, either by invited guests to make presentations or related to legislative or compliance action topic that ties in with a potential issue like you're referring to. So it's generally not timely relative to a particular event. In other words, there's a delay before it gets into the board meeting, typically what happens. So it's not leading edge around these topics, but it does get involved down the line.
Thank you.
Thank you, Felipe. All right, board communications. Are there any board communications?
I just want to say thank you to staff for an ongoing partnership between community volunteers and staff to keep our neighborhood clean. The gateway to this facility is working really well. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank staff for the amazing work they're doing and putting us at the cutting edge, I think, in the whole country. So it's an amazing group of people we have here. And anyway.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So next is closed session. So will Bob or Rob, I guess, read us into closed session?
I could do that. Yes, the board is now going to meet on a closed session item as it's permitted to do under the Brown Act, Ralph M. Brown Act. And that matter will involve labor negotiations and certain personnel matters and real property negotiations. So we will now be adjourning to closed session. After the closed session, there will be a report out of any action taken.
All right. Thank you, Bob.